Hi guys, it's me Lewis, and today I'm going to do a little video on how to be a good writer when telling stories. So, as you may have noticed a few months back, I've mentioned in my live stream video, I think, or possibly in the comment sections, that I've been doing story writing recently as of late, over the last several months, I guess you could say. And of course, as promised, I'm making a video on trying to help people on how to tell a good story. Now, what I've got right here is a list of bullet points, not particularly in an order, but more like the key things that you need to obviously put in a story and make sure you avoid the negatives and add tons of positives within there itself. So. Let's begin. So, let's start off with imagination and creativity. So, that is one of the key things that you need. You need to make sure that your imagination is booming with ideas. It needs to have all these crazy things that actually at the same time, again, crazy but make sense. And of course, it all depends on how you actually portray it and show it off to the world. Now, everyone's got their own creative minds. They have their own creative way of looking at things. So for example, you're going to be seeing a sci-fi film per se, and you've got ideas from that perhaps, and you want to take some form of creative ideas yourself. You want to try and throw in stuff an evil corporation in space is going to take over the galaxy, and this private galactic Federation force is flying over there to stop them and destroy every evil scheme they're trying to plot. Whilst adding, of course, your own little twists on what happens within the plot of the story. So of course, that's one example of that. The other example is oh god, what was it? Oh yeah, is adding possibly, and this is like an optional choice. You can add obviously the creativity, the creative idea of adding the villain side of the story rather than just throwing in the hero side. So if you want to throw in a villain side of that particular story alone, you can instantly it shows what's going on within their perspective. It shows how they are planning all of this, how are they, how they're getting all these supply lines and these trade routes and whatnot, stuff like that. Something like that would actually, drag people in way more, rather than just appearance alone. Because of course, as the saying goes, first appearances count for a lot, and of course, the imagination and creativity is definitely part of that particular meaning. So, with that, it would definitely work wonders. So, next up is what type of medium you're going to put your story in. So, this can go multiple ways. This can go different routes for you. And of course, when it comes to storytelling, it's wise for you to experiment with your work. You are your own independent person. You are your own writer, your own director, and you can direct where you want your story to be in what medium. You can make it into a short film, depends on the budget of that. TV show, again, depending on the budget. Possibly, a very small indie game that you want to put on Steam, or just add it towards possibly just a novel or possibly a comic book. It mainly depends. So when it comes to writing down the whole script for this particular medium, which again, it depends on what it is. So for example, for me, I've been doing comic scripts for my stories, for example. So the best way to do this is this. So, and if you have no skills in writing and literature, and you really want to desperately tell a story, not to worry, comic books are the way to go. So, if you have both the creative mind of art and the creative mind of writing, then you are definitely easily going to pull it off. So, with comic scripts, you can easily it's like the most easiest shit to do. You can basically all you have to do is obviously write the title of the comic book, then obviously right below it, insert image, front cover image. Obviously that's just obviously where the front cover image will go. Then after that you add a new page on your Word document or possibly Google Docs. Not Dots, Google Docs. There we go. Google Dots. Fuck it. Anyway, do all this. It depends on what those two writing applications you're going to use. And of course, once you wrote down the title and obviously the brackets, insert image here in big capital letters, you need to add, of course, obviously the next the next part of obviously prologue issue 1, and type in how many panels are going to be in this particular page alone. So usually in comics, there's usually up to around 5 to 6 panels, possibly 8, depending on what's going on within that scene, and in each panel, you obviously write down panel 1, what goes on in this description, panel 2, what's going on in this description, panel 3, what's going on in this description, and obviously by description I mean as in are these characters arguing, are they having a romantic relationship? Are they fighting an enemy of some kind? Stuff like that. People want to see action when it comes to comics, because of course DC Comics back in the day before they went fucking woke used to have a thing called Action Comics, and of course that's what people want to see in that, which of course would definitely bring a lot of like nostalgia back to those comic book fans, especially with new ideas being brought into the forefront. What I also would suggest is looking up on Google Images comic scripts, which could easily help you on how to like make it a little bit more neater than you would expect. So with literature, which obviously I'm going to admit I'm fucking shit at it, that's why I'm sticking with the comic book scripts, that requires a lot more writing, and it's not based on a script. It's based on large descriptions on what's going on within that particular scene, within that particular chapter alone. Unless you're skipping the time frame a little bit further, like what the Witcher books do, then yeah, go with that as well. So next up is genre. So genre, of course, as I've mentioned earlier, it's nothing that you need to focus on as well. So again, if you have the creative mind, the genre needs to come with it as well. So you need to make sure that your experiments that you're currently working on with your story actually works. You need to make sure that everything goes hand in hand. So what type of genre are you going to go for? Are you going to go for comedy, tragedy, sci-fi, fantasy, possibly along the lines of possibly a horror, psychological thriller, stuff like that. However, there is three genres I would highly advise everyone to avoid at all times, and this by no means an insult or anything. This is just like, for your own sake, for your own possible embarrassing future if you ever do go down this rabbit hole, and that is obviously the erotic genre, the romance genre, and the harem genre. Now, I have, which I'm just going to point out right now, I have no problem with adding a romantic relationship and a sex scene in a story, so as long as the character development between both characters is done correctly. Make sure there's tons of developments, tons of chemistry between the two. Make them start off as like enemies or acquaintances, then work towards working as like close allies and friends, and if you want to take that a stage further, add the romance in there. It may depend on what it is. Of course, 98% would prefer obviously a male and female romantic relationship together. They would prefer that. That would actually get more people to continue on with the story further. But what I would not advise you to do is try and throw in all of that shit right at the very beginning of your story, because that right there kills kills the story. So the romance genre, for example, of course, well, the romance and the erotic genre kind of go together in some sort of case, especially in modern times, because the romance genre, in my personal perspective, should never have been a genre to begin with, because, and for good reason, because in modern day, which I'm not making this shit up. I have literally spent money reading these types of driveled books, and believe you me, I've lost brain cells by reading them. They seem to repeat a message, and I'm not talking about I'm not talking about like a message in a creative sense. I'm talking about a message of the author's miserable fucking existence. I'm talking like stuff that they wanted to achieve in their life goals but couldn't do it, so they wrote it down in a book to make it sound like it isn't based on them, even though it clearly is, and it's practically practically showing signs that they've made tons of mistakes throughout their years as being in their 20s or early 30s, and couldn't actually achieve them. And by that I mean as in finding a man to fall in love with, having children and whatnot, and living happily ever after, which of course the romance genre, in my personal perspective, is known to make people more depressed than trying to like make some form of escapism, which of course is what writing is. That's what it should be. It shouldn't be a form of, oh, I feel depressed because this character is pregnant and whatnot, and I'm in my 40s, my eggs are dried up, and blah 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 blah, and to me, that's kind of thing that people like you and me should avoid at all times. Like, adding a romantic relationship in a story, however, is different. And now you're thinking to yourself, okay, what's the difference between the romance genre and adding a romantic relationship in a story? So let's say you're making a fantasy story based on medieval Europe, right? It's somewhere along those lines, right? So you're making it based on that, and you're making two characters, possibly an orc, an orc and a human, from opposite genders, from opposite cultures, starting off as enemies. They become, they become acquaintances depending on how the story is going to be taken. You add in the friendship after that, and of course they start to become more comfortable. They start to understand one another. Then of course, if you want to add the romance in there, which I mentioned earlier, then yes, go for it. But the harem genre, however, you can throw in harem elements again in your story, similar to what I mentioned with obviously adding a romantic relationship in a story, but do not make it as a genre, because even though the harem genre does get a lot of shit right, the only downside, and believe you me, this is going to turn off so many people from reading your stories, is that the romance genre repeats the same story over and over and over again. And by that I mean as in, the only male protagonist finds a new woman to be in his group of harem, fucks her, and she's officially part of the harem. That's it. That's precisely what the whole genre is. I know for a fact that possibly some harem authors are going to criticize me on that, but hey, that's how I see it. I'm sorry, but no offense, that genre alone is boring as shit. Not gonna lie. So, and speaking of fans, the next up is what number of fans are going to be reading your story. So again, this all depends. Fuck off, Facebook. I do apologise. This all depends on do apologise for the notification. It all depends on how you tell your. It all depends on how you write your story. My apologies. It all depends on how you reach your audience with your stories alone. Not just in terms of writing, but also in terms of commercial exchange, on how to reach a type of audience that you're looking for. So of course everyone has something in common. So if you have something in common, like which I mentioned before, with fantasy and there's like a decent sized audience out there that's into like fantasy novels like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings, then then you practically got yourself an audience right there. You've practically got yourself an audience that's willing to read your book and go, huh, okay. It's not woke or anything. It's not lecturing me to obey this type of agenda or propaganda. It's just a story. It's a story that feels refreshing. It feels nice to actually read something new and original for a change. And of course, with your numbers increasing with your audience, you need to be realistic about it. Not in terms of adding a pie chart, because obviously people don't do pie charts anymore. Because since we now have the internet, we can obviously look at feedback into account. And of course, criticism is a large thing here, because you need to make sure that if a large percentage of your audience hates your story but sees potential in it, you need to look at that feedback and go, okay, what can I do to fix that problem? You can either write a creative way to get around it, or you can retcon the entire thing. Which, of course, that's like the best way to retcon a story if it's that bad. But yeah, like I said, be realistic with your numbers, with your audience. You're not gonna reach every single person across the globe. You're gonna be reaching possibly a large portion, if not a decent one, and that's what you need to focus on at the same time. So next up is inspiration. Now, of course, everyone takes inspiration from different types of stories and characters. So let's take Killer Instinct, for example, which, of course, yes, a video game, but still tells some form of a story. So Let's take that for example, because Killer Instinct takes a lot of inspiration from tons upon tons of different types of characters, celebrities, and all that shit. And two prime examples of this is Cinder and TJ Combo. So Cinder, of course, as you may know, is a guy who's made out of fire, and he's based off of the Human Torch. But of course, it's the design is where the inspiration comes from, not how his backstory is written. His backstory is where he's a lab experiment gone horribly wrong. He's basically became like this flaming figure that can basically just obviously burn people alive. Despite the fact that he's basically just an arrogant dick who thinks he's hot shit. No pun intended. TJ Combo, however, is another prime example of this. He is based off of both Mike Tyson and Muhammad Ali in terms of design and of course in fighting style. Because obviously TJ Combo is a boxer, and that's where Rare kind of took the inspiration from. So yeah, you can take So yeah, if you're looking at a celebrity or possibly a Warhammer 40k Space Marine, and you want to go, I want to create a robot with that similar bulky design but more futuristic and less medieval looking, then yeah, go for it. But at the same time, the backstory needs to be different. You need to make sure that the backstory is refreshing and actually makes sense towards the character alone, or characters, depending on what it is. So next up is how big is the lore? So the lore is practically the lore, of course, obviously. Now you can make this into just one part story, or possibly or a multi-part story. But at the same time, there needs to be explanations in place. So, with a one-part story, for example, you're basically writing down, just one particular story with a few number of characters, and of course the lore is based on the main plot of the story, and of course the backstories of the characters. Backstory on a few number of characters, and there you go. That's practically what you've got. But when it comes to the fast bloated lore, like again with Tolkien's work, or possibly the work of Warhammer 40k. It needs to be split into pieces. So say for example that you and your wife are baking a delicious chocolate cake, right? And it's like a very large chocolate cake, right? And you need to cut it up into like a number of slices. So say for example you want to cut up 10 slices in total, right? And those 10 slices need to, and each of those slices need to have their own specific way of telling the lore on what particular character, faction, location, possibly a guy designing weapons or designing vehicles. Stuff like that is what people need, or perhaps a general leading his army into battle. That's the type of lore that you need, and also another key thing about lore is adding in possibly this one particular character who's off to fight this evil deity who's planning to destroy the world, but his backstory is that he's a family man. He cares about his wife and his kids, but he also cares about humanity and wants to actually save it and stuff like that. Stuff like that will make people go, okay, this is a character that I can resonate. This is a character that I can actually, get behind. Stuff like that. It needs to be something that people can relate to. People can actually understand. Even if they're not related to it at all, they can still sympathize with the character. They can still understand what they're going through, or perhaps they've lost someone in their lives, and they've lost possibly their parents, and of course you're like, oh wow, I've lost my parents. I can understand this guy's suffering. I can understand where he's coming from, even though he's not giving up, he's not backing down. He's actually getting back up and actually continue fighting until the end. Like that's what people love in stories. They want to see strong characters. They want to see strong characters not giving up. They want to make sure that they have strengths and weaknesses. Stuff like that. Those are the key things that people need. And lastly is the character designs, especially when it comes to the whole situation of the character design as well. So of course, as I mentioned before, inspirations count for a lot, and character designs, of course, is a big thing. So of course, say for example, if you're creating a strong masculine male character, for example, right? So if you want to take inspiration from the 80s, where people like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, and all those types of actors were like buff with buzz cut or like long messy hair. That right there will not only get the male audience to go oh shit, he's manly as fuck, he's fucking awesome, but it also will make the women go, oh my god, he's sexy as fuck. Like that's the type of shit that you want for your character. Same goes with a female character, of course. Which again, sex appeal with a female character is also what's important. It depends if you're making the female character possibly young, around obviously in their 20s, of course, in their 20s, of course, or possibly in their early 30s, and you want to make sure that their designs are either badass, sexy, or perhaps both. For example, that's what people would love to see. So but at the same time, it all depends if it actually fits the personality of their character. So say for example, if you're creating a female character in like BDSM style gear, but she's both sexy and psychotic, then yes, that's gonna work. That's probably what people want to see. They'll probably go, oh shit, she's attractive as hell, but of course she's fucking insane, and of course your audience would go, I would hit that. Like that's what people would love to see on that. But again, it depends on how you're writing the story. It depends on how you're all connecting this all together. It keep in mind, this is your story. This is how you are your own writer. You are your own independent director. You take it the way you want to go. But at the same time, you need to make sure that you like the story as well, and you need to make sure that your audience likes the story also, because experimenting with it is key. Because I've been doing that shit for the past several months, and of course you may have to go back and re-edit a bunch of things, and that's okay, because that's the whole point of experimenting with a story. Because every time that a story gets rushed out because of a corporation from Hollywood, for example, tells these writers to get this shit done at a certain deadline, they usually intend to come out hot garbage. And And of course, of course, you being an independent, creator, like you have all the time in the world to actually work on what you love, on what you enjoy doing. And before I go, I want to add one last advice to everyone here. And of course, this is kind of the obvious, but I'm going to say it anyway. Please, for the love of God, do not throw in woke agendas or lecturing people to obey to one's propaganda, because again, you're basically telling your audience fuck you, and you do not want that. You do not want to tell your audience to go fuck themselves because they can throw that right back in your face. What you want is to appreciate your customers. You want to make sure that people purchase your work, people reading your work and enjoying it and feeling that form of escapism flowing into their brains. So yeah, that's all the time for, guys. So don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, and tell me if this advice actually helped you or not, or if there's anything I missed, please do let me know. Okay, guys, peace out.